everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation. Today, I will discuss a framework for integrating multimodal AI into beginning Korean instruction. As Gen AI tools become increasingly common in language education, many discussions focus on what these technologies can do. However, I would argue that the more important question is how AI should be pedagogically structured to support language learning. So, using beginning Korean as a case study, I propose a framework that combines task-based language teaching, multimodal pedagogy, and recent research on AI-mediated language learning. Before I begin, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm an assistant professor at the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center in Monterey, California, where I teach beginning Korean to adult learners. And my academic background combines media studies and language education. Over the last few years, generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and image generation systems have become increasingly visible in language education. These tools can generate text, images, explanations, dialogues, and interactive responses almost instantly. As a result, many educators have become interested in using AI for language teaching. However, discussions often begin with technology and then ask how it might be used in class. So in this presentation, I challenge that logic. Instead of asking what AI can do, I ask what learners need and how AI might be structured to support those needs. The first foundation of this framework is task-based language teaching. TBLT emphasizes learning through meaningful communication rather than isolated practice of grammatical forms. According to Long and Ellis, language development occurs when learners use language to accomplish communicative goals. Importantly, learning often emerges from moments of difficulty. When communication breaks down, learners must negotiate meaning, notice gaps in their knowledge, and repair misunderstandings. These processes play an important role in acquisition. This becomes especially relevant when we consider AI because AI systems are specifically designed to prevent communication from breaking down. The second theoretical foundation comes from multimodal pedagogy. Researchers such as Kress, Van Leuven, and Jewett argue that meaning is constructed through multiple modes, not language alone. Images, visual organization, spatial relationships, and contextual information all contribute to understanding. This perspective is particularly important for beginning language learners. When learners lack sufficient linguistic resources, visual support can significantly enhance comprehension and participation. Gen AI now allows instructors to create customized visual materials quickly and inexpensively, creating new opportunities for multimodal language learning. Recent research suggests that AI offers several potential advantages. It can increase opportunities for interaction, provide immediate feedback, and support personalized learning experiences. At the same time, they also have identified important concerns. Because AI tools prioritize successful communication, they often accommodate learner errors instead of drawing attention to them. As a result, learners may complete interactions successfully without recognizing important linguistic weaknesses. This creates an important tension between communication and language development. The purpose of this study is not to evaluate a specific AI tool. This is a theory driven conceptual and analysis. The goal is to develop a pedagogical framework that instructors can use when designing AI supported learning activities for beginning learners. The framework is informed by existing scholarship and by practical challenges encountered in Korean language instruction. Three guiding questions shape this study. First, what principles should guide the integration of multimodal AI into beginning Korean instruction? Second, how can AI support beginning learners while remaining aligned with language learning goals? Third, what challenges and tensions emerge when AI becomes part of the instructional process? These questions provide the organizational structure for the framework presented today. In terms of methodology, this study uses a theory-driven design analysis. I synthesize insights from three bodies of scholarship shown here. So the goal is to identify design principles that can guide pedagogical decision making. This approach is appropriate because AI integration remains an emerging area where conceptual clarity is still needed. Beginning Korean provides a particularly useful context for analysis. For English-speaking learners, Korean differs substantially from English in grammar, sentence structure, writing system, and social-linguistic conventions. Learners must simultaneously acquire linguistic forms and understand how language reflects social relationships. These characteristics make instructional design especially important and allow us to see AI-related challenges more clearly. The analytical process involved four stages. First, I reviewed scholarship. Second, I identified recurring concerns and opportunities described across those literatures. Third, I synthesized those findings into a set of pedagogical principles. Finally, I applied those principles to beginning Korean instruction and considered how they might shape classroom practice. One important finding is that beginning Korean creates instructional conditions that differ from many other language contexts. Learners cannot simply focus on vocab or grammar in isolation. They must simultaneously navigate unfamiliar linguistic structures, learn a new writing system, and make socially appropriate language choices. Because these demands occur together, instructional support becomes particularly important. This is one reason why unstructured AI use may be problematic for novice learners. The first principle emerging from this analysis is instructor-led deployment. AI systems do not understand curricular sequencing, learning objectives, or learner readiness. Beginning learners also often lack the expertise necessary to evaluate AI-generated language independently. Therefore, instructors remain responsible for determining when AI is used, how it is used, and for what purposes it is used. In this approach, AI functions as a pedagogical resource rather than an autonomous tutor. The second principle is constrained and scaffolded task design. One of the greatest strengths of Gen AI is flexibility. However, for beginning learners, unlimited flexibility can become a disadvantage. When learners interact with AI without sufficient structure, they may encounter language far beyond their current proficiency level, or they may rely excessively on AI generated output. For this reason, tasks should include constraints or limitations that focus learner attention on specific instructional objectives. At the same time, scaffolds such as models, guided prompts, and phrase banks provide support that allows learners to participate successfully while still requiring meaningful language production. The third principle concerns multimodal support. Gen AI makes it possible to create images, dialogues, and learning materials almost instantly. However, simply adding visuals does not automatically improve learning. Each multimodal resource should serve a clear instructional goal. For example, an image may support vocab acquisition, illustrate cultural practices, or provide context for communicative interaction. The educational value comes from alignment with learning objectives rather than from technological novelty. So, the first example illustrates how AI visuals can support vocab learning. For instance, an instructor can generate an image of a Korean apartment. Then students first identify and label objects within the scene using target vocab and phrases. Next, they can describe locations and spatial relationships among those objects. Finally, they move toward more independent descriptions. Notice that the image itself is not the lesson. So the image serves as a scaffold that supports a carefully sequenced learning task. A second example focuses on speech levels, one of the most challenging aspects of beginning Korean. AI can create multiple versions of the same conversation based on different social relationships. Students compare these dialogues and identify differences in grammatical forms and linguistic choices. And then they can also discuss why those differences exist. This activity encourages students to examine language critically rather than simply accepting AI output as correct. A third example involves speaking practice. Rather than allowing unrestricted conversation, the instructor specifies the situation, the vocab, and the grammar that students should use. Then students interact with AI within those limitations. Afterward, they complete a reflection activity in which they identify what they produced successfully and what remains difficult. This reflection process is very important because AI often makes communication appear more successful than learners' actual language abilities might suggest. The first major tension involves communicative success and language development. As we all know, AI is designed to keep conversations moving. When learners make mistakes, AI often infers their intended meaning and responds accordingly. From a communication perspective, this is impressive. However, language development often depends on recognizing errors, experiencing misunderstandings, and repairing communication breakdowns. As a result, successful communication does not always indicate meaningful language development. The second tension concerns authenticity. AI can generate highly authentic Korean almost instantly. However, authentic language is not always appropriate for beginning learners. Native speaker language often contains vocab, grammar, and cultural references that exceed learners' current abilities. Therefore, instructors must carefully evaluate AI generated materials, and determine whether they are developmentally appropriate for the learners who will use them. The third tension is about support and effort. One reason learners enjoy AI is that assistance is always available. However, learning requires cognitive effort. If AI consistently supplies vocab, grammar, and responses, learners may become increasingly dependent on the technology. The challenge is not whether support should exist, but how much support should be provided and when it should be withdrawn. Effective instructional design maintains learner effort as a central component of the learning process. Several implications emerge from this discussion. First, AI does not diminish the importance of teachers. In fact, it increases the importance of pedagogical expertise. When AI can create content instantly, the instructor's role shifts more toward evaluation, adaptation, sequencing, and contextualization. Teacher expertise becomes even more important because instructional quality depends on pedagogical judgment. Future research can investigate how these principles operate in actual classrooms. For example, researchers could compare AI supported tasks and traditional tasks to determine whether meaningful differences emerge in learner development. Such studies would help validate and refine the framework proposed here. Another promising direction would be comparing constrained and unconstrained AI mediated activities. The framework assumes that carefully structured activities are more beneficial than unrestricted interaction. However, empirical evidence is still needed. Researchers could examine learner performance in terms of accuracy, complexity, and fluency across different task conditions. The framework was developed through the lens of beginning Korean. So future studies should explore whether similar principles apply to other typologically distant languages. Comparative research could help determine the broader applicability of the framework. The framework proposed today places pedagogy before technology. This is actually the title of my full article, Pedagogy Before Technology. So AI becomes more valuable when it functions as a structured partner, a pedagogical partner, operating within carefully designed instructional environments. The educational value of AI emerges not from the technology itself, but from the pedagogical decisions that shape its use. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope this presentation has contributed to ongoing conversations about AI and language education.